My name is Emily, I'm 34, and my entire family sat me down at my own birthday dinner and told me to accept that my sister was sleeping with my husband. Before I tell you about their smug smiles vanishing when my lawyer stood up and the world they built on lies came crashing down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started with a scent. A cloyingly sweet, artificial coconut scent, the kind you'd find in a cheap body spray from a drugstore aisle. It was a ghost on the collar of my husband Mark's crisp, white shirt when he came home from a supposed business conference in Chicago. It was the exact, unmistakable scent of the body lotion my younger sister, Olivia, slathered on herself every single day of her life. It was her signature. I was standing in the laundry room, sorting whites from colors, when I first caught it. I lifted the shirt to my nose, inhaling deeply. It wasn't faint. It was an announcement. My heart gave a painful thud against my ribs. It was a small thing, a tiny detail in the fabric of our lives, but it felt like a loose thread that, if pulled, could unravel everything. That evening, as we sat on the sofa watching some mindless TV show, I tried to make my voice sound casual. "Your shirt smelled a little like Olivia's lotion today," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. "Did you guys meet up for a drink or something?" Mark didn't miss a beat. He laughed, a short, dismissive chuckle that was meant to reassure but only put me more on edge. "Honey, every hotel soap smells the same these days. All that coconut and vanilla stuff." He draped his arm around me, pulling me closer. His touch, which usually felt like home, suddenly felt like a cage. "You're working way too hard. Getting a little paranoid, don't you think?" He tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at him. His smile was wide, but it was just a movement of his lips. His eyes were cold, watchful. He was lying. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. That feeling of paranoia, as he called it, became my unwanted companion. It followed me through the grocery store, sat beside me at my desk at work, and tucked me into bed at night. A week later, my paranoia found its validation. Mark had gone on another trip, this time a solo reset to the beach. "Just need to clear my head," he'd said, kissing me goodbye with that same hollow affection. He posted a photo on his social media account. It was a perfect shot for a man trying to project an image of carefree independence. He was beaming, his expensive sunglasses perched on his nose, the ocean a brilliant blue behind him. The caption read, "Just what I needed. #solo trip #recharge." I loved that picture, for about 10 seconds. My friends were liking it, commenting "looks amazing," and so jealous. But something drew my eye. An instinct I couldn't ignore. My finger moved across the screen, zooming in on the dark lenses of his sunglasses. The image was tiny, distorted by the curve of the glass, but it was there. A reflection. A figure. It was a woman, her head thrown back in laughter, her blonde hair catching the sun. She was wearing a bright yellow bikini. Olivia's favorite yellow bikini. The world didn't just tilt on its axis, it fell away completely, leaving me in a silent, airless void. My blood ran cold. It was a physical sensation, a wave of ice that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It felt like a punch to the gut, a brutal, unexpected blow that knocked all the air from my lungs. I dropped my phone on the rug as if it had burned me. I just stared at the wall, at the framed photos of our wedding, of family vacations, of a life I now realized was a complete and utter fraud. The phone, lying face down on the floor, felt like a 50-pound weight. It contained a truth so ugly I didn't know how I could possibly live with it. For 2 days, I existed in a fog. I went to work, I smiled at my colleagues, I answered emails. But inside, I was screaming. I thought about confronting him, about screaming and throwing things. But what would that accomplish? He would just lie again. He would twist it, turn it back on me, call me crazy. No, I needed more than just a gut feeling and a blurry reflection. I needed my family. I needed my mother's comfort, my father's wisdom, my brother's support. I was a fool. I was so naive. I gathered them that weekend in my parents' living room. The same room where we'd opened Christmas presents, where I'd announced my engagement to Mark, where Olivia had announced she was dropping out of college to find herself. It was a room saturated with our history. I felt that history would protect me. I held up my phone, my hand shaking so violently the screen blurred. My voice trembled as I explained. It's Olivia. In the reflection. I know it is. And his shirt, it smelled like her. My mother, Eleanor, was the first to speak. She didn't even glance at the phone. She just sighed, a long, suffering sound she had perfected over years of my perceived failures and Olivia's celebrated successes. Oh, Emily. Honestly. You and your abandonment issues. Ever since you were a little girl, you've needed to create drama to be the center of attention. Mark is a wonderful husband. Olivia adores you. You need to stop this. My father, Richard, was hiding behind the weekend newspaper. He lowered it just enough to peer at me over the top, his eyes full of that familiar, weary disappointment. You're working too hard, kiddo, he said, already folding the paper, dismissing me. You're seeing things that aren't there. Stress can play tricks on your mind. My brother, Ethan, who was scrolling through his own phone, just snorted. Paranoid, Em. Seriously. It's a blurry reflection. It could be anyone. You sound crazy. And Olivia? She crumpled. Like a professional actress hitting her mark, she burst into tears. Big, theatrical, gasping sobs that had everyone in the room rushing to her side. My mother wrapped an arm around her. My father patted her shoulder. How could you think that of me? She wailed, her face buried in our mother's shoulder. Of Mark? We love you. You're my sister. Why are you trying to destroy my life? I stood there, in the center of the room, completely and utterly alone. I was surrounded by the 4 people who were supposed to be my sanctuary, and they were looking at me not with concern, but with cold, hard annoyance. I wasn't their daughter or their sister who was in pain. I was a problem. A messy, inconvenient problem to be managed and shut down. They had formed a wall of denial, and I was on the outside. In that moment, watching my mother soothe the woman who was sleeping with my husband, I understood. They had already chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. That night, something inside me changed. The hot, messy grief didn't vanish, but it began to cool and crystallize. It turned from a painful, throbbing wound into something cold, hard, and sharp. The sadness was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but a new feeling was taking over. Fury. A deep, quiet, methodical fury began to burn where my heart used to be. They thought I was paranoid. They thought I was crazy. Fine. I would show them what focused paranoia and a little bit of crazy could really do. My home office, a room I'd always associated with paying bills and organizing tax receipts, became my war room. Mark had always handled the finances, insisting it stressed me out. I'll take care of it, honey, he'd always say. I saw it now for the control tactic it was. I spent hours upon hours at that desk, fueled by black coffee and righteous anger, printing out years of bank statements, credit card bills, and loan documents. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my eyes scanning columns of numbers. And then I found it. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the house silent around me. A single transaction from 6 months prior. A $62,000 withdrawal from our home equity line of credit. My breath caught in my throat. We had taken out that helic for emergencies, a new roof, a medical crisis. We had both sworn an oath never to touch it unless it was a matter of life or death. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was real. I started tracing the money. It wasn't difficult if you knew where to look. The funds had been wired from our joint account to a newly opened business account. I held my breath as I searched the name of the LLC on the state's public business registry. The name on the account? Livy's Boutique, LLC. Registered agent, Olivia Davenport. I leaned back in my chair, the printed statement shaking in my hand. He had stolen from our home, from our family's future, to fund his affair and my sister's vanity project. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me speechless. This wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a cold, calculated financial assault. They weren't just sleeping together in secret, they were actively building a life, a business, on the back of my work, my trust, and my home. But the rabbit hole went deeper. The next discovery was the one that truly shattered the last vestiges of my innocence. I had always wondered about my inheritance from my grandmother. She had adored me, and she'd set up a sizable trust fund to ensure I would always have a safety net. But accessing it had always been a nightmare. Every time I inquired, my mother would wave it away with vague excuses. "There are legal complications, darling. The market is down, it's not a good time. You need to prove you're more financially mature first." Driven by this new, terrifying clarity, I decided to bypass my mother entirely. I contacted the law firm that managed my grandmother's estate. It took days of persistent, borderline harassing phone calls to get anyone to talk to me. I was a nuisance they kept trying to swat away. Finally, a senior paralegal, a kind woman named Maria whose voice was filled with a weary sort of pity, agreed to send me the full file on the trust. "You have a right to see it, Mrs. Porter," she'd said, and I almost cried with gratitude. When the thick manila envelope arrived by courier, it felt as heavy as a tombstone. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a stack of legal documents that was inches thick. And on top, meticulously organized by date, was a series of motions filed with the family court over the last 5 years. All of them had been filed by my mother, Eleanor. I read them one by one, my vision blurring with tears of rage. She had repeatedly petitioned the court to keep the trust under her sole control, arguing that I, her daughter, was mentally and emotionally unstable, a proven spendthrift, and incapable of managing her own affairs. She had used my own struggles with anxiety often caused by her and her family's treatment of me, as a weapon. She had painted me as a fragile, hysterical child to a judge, all to keep her hands on my money. My grandmother's gift, my safety net, was being used as a leash. She was literally funding her golden child's lifestyle by illegally withholding funds that were rightfully mine. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a theft. This was a conspiracy. A long-term, coordinated campaign by my entire family to marginalize me, to control me, to keep me down. The final straw, the action that pushed me from a woman seeking truth to a woman planning a war, was the intervention. It was a Tuesday night. I came home from a long day at work, my mind swimming with lawyers and legal motions, to find them all there. They were sitting in my living room, arranged like a tribunal. And with them was a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. He had silver hair, a kind, professional smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a profoundly calm demeanor that I found instantly terrifying. My mother stood up, her face a mask of loving concern. "Emily, darling. We were so worried, we didn't know what else to do. This is Dr. Alistair Finch. He's a psychiatrist, and he's here to help." They took turns speaking. It was a well-rehearsed performance. They spoke of my erratic behavior, my delusions about Olivia and Mark, my unhealthy obsession with the family finances. They used the very evidence of their crimes as proof of my instability. The bank statements weren't proof of theft, they were evidence of my financial fixation. The photo wasn't proof of an affair, it was proof of my persecution complex. Dr. Finch listened to it all, nodding patiently. Then he turned his calm, assessing gaze on me. "Emily," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. "Your family loves you very much. They're deeply worried about you. From what they've described, and from what I'm observing in your agitated state, I'm inclined to agree that a short, voluntary stay at a private facility would be immensely beneficial." A quiet place. To rest, to get your thoughts in order, to get back to being yourself. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a metaphor, I felt the warmth drain from my body. They weren't just trying to gaslight me anymore. They were trying to have me legally declared incompetent. To lock me away, discredit me completely, so they could take everything without a fight. I looked at their faces, one by one. My mother's tight, determined smile of a martyr. My father's weary resignation, already convinced of my guilt. My brother's smug indifference, scrolling on his phone again. And Mark and Olivia, sitting side by side on my sofa, actually holding hands in front of me now, looking at me with expressions of pure, feigned sympathy. In that single, horrifying moment, a switch flipped deep inside my brain. The fear, the hurt, the confusion, it all vanished. It was replaced by an arctic calm, a chilling clarity. I was done being the victim. I was done crying. I was done being their punching bag. I lowered my head, letting my hair fall over my face to hide the sudden, cold fire in my eyes. I took a shaky, deliberate breath, a perfect performance for my captive audience. "Okay," I whispered, my voice cracking just right on cue. Maybe you're right. I'm so tired of fighting. I'll think about it." I saw the look of triumphant relief they exchanged over my bowed head. They thought they had finally won. They thought they had finally broken me. They had no idea they had just armed me. As I walked slowly up the stairs to my bedroom, one thought echoed in my mind, a silent, vicious promise. My 34th birthday was in 2 weeks. And I was going to throw myself a party they would never, ever forget. The next morning, I woke up a different woman. The victim I had been was gone, and in her place was a client. A client with a singular, burning purpose. Before the sun was fully up, I was online, transferring a significant portion of my private savings account, money I'd painstakingly earned from years of freelance graphic design projects and kept hidden for a rainy day, into a new account at a different bank. Well, it was pouring. My first call, at 9:01 a.m., was to Sarah Chun. Her name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones in the circles I was now researching. She was a shark in a designer suit, a divorce lawyer so ruthless she was known for making cheating husbands weep on the witness stand. When I walked into her sleek, minimalist office overlooking the city, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I laid out the story, my voice even and low. I placed each piece of evidence on her glass desk, the bank statements, the photo, the stack of fraudulent court motions regarding my inheritance. She listened without a single interruption, her manicured fingers steepled under her chin, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her leather chair and studied me for a long moment. A flicker of something that looked like professional admiration crossed her face. "They didn't just break your heart, Emily," she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. "They committed felony fraud, conspiracy, and grand larceny. The affair is the least of their problems. So, tell me. What is it you want to do?" "I want to burn it all to the ground," I said, the words tasting like ash and freedom. A slow, wolfish smile spread across Sarah's face. "I can do that. But first, we need more. We need irrefutable proof. We need things they can't possibly talk their way out of." She picked up her phone. "I'm hiring you a private investigator. His name is Enzo Moretti. He's expensive as hell, but he's a ghost. He gets things no one else can." Enzo was the opposite of what I expected. He was a quiet, unassuming man in his 50s who looked more like a high school history teacher than a PI. But he was brutally effective. In just over a week, he delivered a digital folder that was a treasure trove of my family's deceit. He had itemized hotel receipts from Mark and Olivia's business trips, complete with room service charges for champagne and strawberries. He had high-resolution, time-stamped photos of them kissing outside a romantic restaurant 2 towns over. He even had audio recordings, legally obtained in our one-party consent state, of my mother on the phone with my aunt, laughing about how she was managing my inheritance and keeping me compliant and out of the way. Every file, every piece of evidence, was another nail in their collective coffin. We compiled it all into what Sarah chillingly called the dossiers of truth. 5 identical, spiral-bound booklets, professionally printed and organized with tabs. One for each of them. But as we were finalizing the plan for the birthday dinner, that nagging thought, that seed of doubt planted during the intervention, grew into an obsession. I thought back on my entire life, replaying it in my mind. Olivia was always the golden child. She got the brand new convertible for her 16th birthday, I got her 10-year-old sedan. She got her tuition paid for an expensive private arts college, which she dropped out of. I was steered towards the in-state university and told to apply for scholarships. It was more than just typical sibling favoritism. It was a systemic, lifelong pattern of being treated as secondary. Less than. During a late-night strategy call with Sarah, I voiced the thought that had been haunting me. "It's like I'm not even their kid," I said, the words coming out in a rush of exhausted frustration. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Emily," Sarah said, her voice suddenly very careful. "We have Enzo on retainer for another day. It's a long shot, but do you want us to find out?" A wild, terrifying, and exhilarating idea took hold. It was the stuff of daytime soap operas. It was insane. But my life was already a melodrama, so what was one more plot twist? "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but my conviction was absolute. "I need to know." Enzo was a master of his craft. A coffee cup Richard had used and left behind during a brief, awkward visit to my house a few days earlier was all he needed. He overnighted to a private lab. The results would be delivered electronically on the afternoon of my birthday. The day of the party. The day of reckoning. The night of my birthday dinner felt surreal, like a scene from a movie I was watching from a great distance. We were in the plush, soundproofed private dining room of La Bellevue, an absurdly expensive French restaurant my mother adored. It was the perfect stage for the performance to come. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. They were all there, dressed in their finest, their faces arranged in masks of fond celebration. They truly thought this dinner was their victory lap, a celebration of my final, pathetic surrender to their narrative. My father, Richard, stood to make the first toast. He raised his glass of Cabernet. "To Emily," he said, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "We're so glad you've decided to let go of all that anger and embrace the spirit of forgiveness. In the end, family is all that matters." My mother followed, dabbing a crocodile tear from the corner of her eye. "To moving forward," she chimed in, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "And to getting you the help and support you truly need. We will always be here for you, darling." Mark and Olivia sat beside each other, their chairs a little too close, their hands brushing under the table. They looked at me with that sickening, proprietary blend of pity and self-satisfaction. They had won. I let them finish their charade. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I was no longer nervous. I was an instrument of fate. Across the room, I met Sarah's eyes. She was sitting at a small, two-person table near the door, looking chic and predatory as she nursed a club soda, just as we'd planned. I gave her the slightest nod. This was it. Showtime. Sarah Chen stood up. The click of her heels on the polished hardwood floor was the only sound in the suddenly quiet room. All eyes turned to her. She was elegance and danger wrapped in a black silk blouse. She approached our table with the unhurried grace of a panther. "Good evening," she said, her voice cool and clear, cutting through the comfortable atmosphere like a shard of glass. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm Emily's attorney." The smiles froze on their faces. Utter confusion flickered in their eyes, followed by a dawning sense of alarm. Emily was so touched by your concern for her well-being that she wanted to share a few party favors with you all, Sarah continued, her voice devoid of any emotion. Her young, grim-faced male assistant, who had been waiting by the door, stepped forward. In his hands, he held a stack of 5 thick, spiral-bound dossiers. He moved around the table, placing one in front of each of them. One for Mark. One for Olivia. One for Eleanor. One for Richard. And one for Ethan. Silence. No one moved. They stared at the booklets as if they were venomous snakes. Go on, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a command. Open your gifts. My father, Richard, was the first to obey, his movements stiff. He opened the cover. His face went slack, all the color draining from it. The first page was a high-resolution, glossy 8x10 photograph of Mark and Olivia, locked in a passionate, open-mouthed kiss on a hotel balcony, the city lights of Chicago twinkling behind them like mocking stars. Olivia gasped, snatching her own dossier. She flipped through the pages frantically, each page of fresh, documented horror. Itemized hotel receipts bearing both their names. Transcripts of their text messages, filled with cruel jokes at my expense, sexual innuendos, and detailed plans for their boutique. Once Em is settled in the rest facility, we'll have all the time in the world, one of Mark's texts read. Mark just stared at his copy, his mouth slightly agape, his face turning a pasty, sickly white. He saw the next section, tabbed financials. The bank statements showing the $62,000 transfer, highlighted in fluorescent yellow. The articles of incorporation for Livy's Boutique, LLC. His signature was on every page. My brother Ethan, for once, was speechless. He saw the text threads he was a part of, where he called me unhinged and told Olivia to just ignore her, she'll get over it. My mother, Eleanor, was made of stronger, colder stuff. She stared at me, her eyes filled with pure, unadulterated venom. But then she got to her own tabbed section. Her carefully constructed composure shattered. Her face crumpled as she read the transcripts of her own words, her recorded phone calls with my aunt, detailing exactly how she had filed fraudulent motions to block my inheritance, calling me unstable. She'd even bragged about how this would secure a higher salary for herself at her job, since she wouldn't have to worry about supporting me. The final page in her section was a formal notice from Sarah's office of an impending lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. But the show wasn't over. Sarah let the horrified, suffocating silence hang in the air for a moment longer. Then, she reached into her satchel and produced one last document. She placed it with a soft thud in the center of the table. There's one final piece of information, Sarah announced to the stunned room. A matter of paternity that clarifies a great deal. She slid the single sheet of paper towards my father. It was a certified lab report. A DNA analysis. This report confirms, with 99.999% certainty, Sarah said, her voice ringing with the clear, cold finality of a judge's gavel, that you, Richard, share no genetic markers with Emily. You are not her biological father. A collective, strangled gasp went through the room. Richard looked from the damning paper to my mother, his face a mask of utter, profound betrayal. The foundation of their 35-year marriage, of his entire life, had just been obliterated on the table of a French restaurant. However, Sarah added, twisting the knife with surgical precision, we do have reason to believe we know who is. She looked directly at me, a glimmer of sympathy in her otherwise professional gaze. Her godfather. A man who has always treated her with kindness. Judge Harmon. It was a checkmate. The room was a tableau of absolute ruin. Eleanor had collapsed into guttural, ugly sobs, not of remorse, but of pure, selfish exposure. Richard was staring into space, his world turned inside out. Olivia and Mark were looking at each other in raw panic, their shared future of stolen money and illicit love evaporating before their eyes. Several senior partners from Mark's law firm were dining in the main room. His career, his hope for a promotion, was over. My brother Ethan just looked sick to his stomach, finally realizing he had backed the wrong side in a war he didn't even understand. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, there was only a ringing, deafening silence. The clinking glasses and soft music from the main restaurant outside our private room seemed a universe away. My family, or the collection of people I had once called my family, were frozen. They were shattered figures in a wax museum of their own making, each trapped in their own personal hell of exposure. I stood up. My legs, which had felt like jelly for months, were now pillars of stone. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The time for that was long past. I looked at each of them, my gaze moving slowly around the table, lingering for a moment on each ruined face. I looked at Mark, my husband, a man I now saw not as a heartbreaker but as a weak, pathetic thief, a hollow man propped up by lies. I looked at Olivia, my sister, her golden child glow finally extinguished, leaving only a greedy, panicked, and surprisingly plain woman in its place. I looked at Richard, the man who had raised me with a quiet, constant disapproval that I now, with heartbreaking clarity, finally understood. Then, my gaze landed on my mother. Eleanor. The architect of my pain, the mastermind of this grand deception. She was staring back at me, her face streaked with black mascara, a look of pure, undiluted hatred in her eyes. It was the look of a cornered animal. And in that moment, looking at the woman who gave birth to me, I felt nothing. Not love, not anger, not even pity. Just a void. An empty space where a lifetime of feeling used to be. "You took years of my life," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room with the force of a wrecking ball. "You took my peace, my trust, and my money. You tried to take my sanity and my freedom. You will not get one more second. You will not get one more word." I picked up my pristine linen napkin and placed it neatly on the table beside my untouched plate of food. "This was the last meal we will ever share," I stated, not as a threat, but as a simple, immutable fact. "My lawyer will handle the divorce. She will handle the lawsuit for my full inheritance, with damages. And she will handle the recovery of the stolen funds from both of you." I looked at Mark and Olivia. "Have the lives you all so richly deserve." With that, Sarah and I turned and walked out of the room. I did not look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of their world collapsing behind me, the shockwaves of their implosion. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't buried underneath it. I was walking away from the rubble, into the clean, cool night air, finally, blessedly, free. A year can change everything. I'm writing this from the wide, wraparound porch of a house on a lake. My house. It's the same sprawling, cedar-shingled house my family had to sell in a fire sale to cover their catastrophic legal fees and mounting debts. After my divorce from Mark was finalized and my lawsuit successfully clawed back every single penny of my inheritance, plus punitive damages, I bought it through a carefully constructed shell corporation. They never knew it was me. The quiet, daily pleasure of that irony is sweeter than any revenge. The air here smells of pine and damp earth and the coming rain, not deceit and cheap coconut lotion. My life is quiet now, and I've learned that quiet is the most valuable commodity on earth. Mark and Olivia's boutique never opened. Their affair, made public in the most spectacular and detailed way, torched their professional and social lives. The last I heard, they were living in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment 2 states away, drowning in debt and mutual resentment. The perfect couple. Richard and Eleanor's divorce was as brutal and swift as you might imagine. The revelation of my true paternity was a balm from which their 35-year marriage could never recover. My father, Richard, sent me one letter 6 months ago. It was short, stilted, and full of a remorse that came 34 years too late. I read it, and then I burned it. I never wrote back. The most profound change, however, the one that has truly healed the deepest parts of me, was connecting with my real father. Judge Harmon. A man who had been a kind, gentle, peripheral figure my whole life. My godfather. When I finally found the courage to call him and tell him everything, he drove 4 hours to see me that same day. He wept on this very porch. He said he had loved my mother once, a lifetime ago, but she had chosen Richard and a life of more financial stability. She never told him she was pregnant. Now, we're making up for lost time. He's retired now. He visits the lake house often. We fish off the dock, we work in the garden, we talk for hours. We are building something new and real and honest on the ashes of all those old lies. I used a portion of my reclaimed inheritance, the money my grandmother always intended for me, to start a small foundation. It's called the Lighthouse Fund. It provides initial pro bono legal consultations and psychological support for people trying to extricate themselves from toxic and abusive family situations. It's my way of turning the ugliest thing that ever happened to me into a beacon for someone else lost in a storm. My new friends, the few true ones who stood by me when I had nothing but a crazy story, helped me run it. I used to think family was an obligation, an immutable bond of blood you were stuck with, for better or for worse. Now I know that's not true. True family is a bond of trust, of respect, of safety. It's the family you build, the one you choose, not the one you're born into. The greatest wealth isn't money in the bank or a beautiful house on a lake. It's peace. A deep, unshakable peace in your own soul. And I have finally, after a lifetime of searching, found it. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I felt like I had to, for anyone out there who feels trapped. My question for you all is, what's the single most important quality you believe makes a real family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more. You never know whose story might give you the strength you need.